I know.
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
On the back of my chair.
I said you may if you put that in state statute.
You want to do that?
I mean, it's a statute.
Yeah, if it gets cold, that's what I put over my legs. Well, usually I bring my black wool coat, my long one, but, oh, I guess I wish I was.
You know, actually, I like being in this position. You get more space.
I have 0.
Reminded you to move.
All right, let's get this work session rolling. We're starting off tonight with the fiscal year 2018 audit report. Bonnie, please.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Dennis, the Finance Director. I would like to introduce Julie Fahey. She is the partner with Talbot, Corvola, and Warwick, TKW, our audit firm. Troy Richland, he's the audit committee chair, was unable to join us this evening. Bonnie, can you get closer to the mic? Oh, sorry. Thanks. Troy Richland was not able to join us this evening, so Julie is here to present the audit and to give you an overview.
All right, well, thank you for having me here this afternoon. I'm here this evening to discuss, and I actually created like a little handout that I think each of you have at your desk there, but just the audit results for this last fiscal year for June 30, 2018. So the city produces this CAFR. It's quite voluminous. It's over 100 pages. It's a lot of financial information in there. And based upon our audit procedures, we issue an independent auditor's report. That's what you'll see on your first page here. And it was an unmodified opinion. This is a clean opinion. This is what you want to see when you have an audit done. So based upon all the audit tests that we did, all the audit procedures, being on site, all the detailed testing that we did, we felt that the financial statements were fairly presented. So that's good. The second report that we have included within this CAFR is a report on compliance and internal control over financial reporting performed in accordance with Oregon state regulations. So the state of Oregon asks all governmental entities to be subject to certain additional audit procedures that we report on, and those are included within the CAFR as well. And there are certain bullet items that we list, and if there was any, the biggest items that we probably look at is budget compliance, as well as some public contracting law and meeting notices and different reporting items within the CAFR. If there were any exceptions to that, we would note those as well. We did note a couple this year, just bringing to your attention a few non-compliance items related to over expenditures, and I think in the general fund related to different items. So that includes 2 reports that we have within the CAFR. So because the city expended federal expenditures greater than $750,000 this year, they were subject to a single audit under uniform guidance. The city does not actually usually have a single audit. They kind of jump in and out maybe every 3 or 4 years that they are subject to a single audit based upon their expenditures. They were this last year. So moving on to the next page, there are 2 reports that I include when we perform a single audit. The first one being a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. So happy to report that we found no control issues, no control findings, and no compliance findings as well. No significant deficiencies or material weaknesses to report with the city. The second one, based upon the major program that we audited, is our report on compliance for each major federal program under uniform guidance. And we reported no control findings and no compliance findings there as well. It's quite a compliment to the city in the fact that they're not usually subject to a single audit, and there's more rigorous requirements that have to be complied with, and sometimes finance or grant accountants aren't always familiar with that, but it's a compliment to the city in the fact that we didn't find any findings, and they did a really good job in implementing and following the guidance that was out there. So it was good for them. The last item, so that covers, there were 4 reports that I had within this CAFR. The last item that I was going to cover is a separate letter that's issued from the independent auditors to you, those charged with governance, and it was reviewed with the audit committee as well, are certain required communications. So that's on the last slide. We do meet with the audit committee twice. We meet with them before we begin the audit. We met with them during the summer in July. And then we also meet with them at the conclusion of the audit after the audit's issued. And we met with them just a few weeks ago in January. So, and that they approved and accepted the audit at that point. We're happy to report there were no difficulties encountered during the audit. There were no auditor proposed journal entries. We did have one small misstatement that we report within that communications related to revenue cutoff. There were no disagreements with management, and we're not aware of any consultations that management had with other accountants. Are there any questions on going over the financial reporting in the CAFR for the year?
We've gotten used to really good work from our finance department. As long as any of us have been on council, it's always been good news. So It's nice to have that continue with our new finance director.
As the firm TKW, we're really happy that Bonnie is in the position of the finance director. We think that she does a great job of just the tone at the top and running the department and the financial reporting. We appreciate the transparency and the communication that the finance team has with us and just the help that they offer us during the audit. Very much so. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Would now be an appropriate time to mention the GFOA award?
Yeah, we actually just recently received the GFOA award for the budget, and that is one of the highest honors that we can receive for the budget book, and so it's a testament to all of you in the budget committee for receiving that award.
Good job.
Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Great.
I just have to say, as the new appointee to the audit committee, this was a really nice thing to come into. So thank you.
Makes life easy, huh? Yeah, easier anyhow.
Great.
So do we also have the short version, the PAFR version this year?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you both have the CAFR and the PAFR. Definitely, if you'd like to have more PAFRs to send them out, I can get those to you. But they were both submitted, both the CAFR and PAFR.
Do we make them available, just the PAFR one at the library and places like that, or?
Yes, we have several of them sent out to all of the buildings in the citywide.
Yeah, great.
So,
Great.
So, great.
So people out there who want to get into the details of, there's a neat graphic in there that shows like $1 and how it's divided up, or at least there always was in the past, and it gives you a good sense of what the city spends money on. So.
It's actually more readable than your average budget.
Yes,
so
way more
appreciate
readable
that.
than the budget itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely the PAFR is definitely meant for the non-financial aspect. It's an easier reading. It's much more exciting to read the PAFR than is the full CAFR itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
I actually just wanted to thank Bonnie. I know that she's been going through a huge transition over the last 6 months, but I really appreciate also hearing how your process went, and we're very lucky to have her. So she's done excellent work, and thank you to your team.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Our next item is Milwaukie Bay Park, an update, and this will be presented by Assistant City Manager Kelly Brooks.
Plethora of other people.
And an army of people from NCPRD, probably.
Exactly. Hello, Kelly Brooks, and as always, I'm really here just to introduce the item tonight. You're going to hear from NCPRD and their team of experts. But the last time I did this, I really failed to do something pretty important, which is recognize quite a few people that are in this room right now, which have been putting in a lot of time to this project over the past year. One of them is Councilor Parks. She's our council liaison to PARB, and also goes to the steering advisory committee meetings for this project and has been doing that a lot over the past year and going to events. So I just wanted to recognize that. And then also behind me, we've got Lisa Lashbrook, Ben Johnson, and Gary Klein. In the same boat, when we worked with NCPRD to set up the advisory committee for this project, we said, put all of PARB on. Everyone to be involved, and they have risen to that challenge. So not only have they been going to their PARB meetings, not only have they been going to the city events that we set up around parks, they've also been going to the steering advisory committee meetings throughout the way. So I didn't say that last time, and I should have. So I just wanted to recognize them because they're here in the room tonight. And with that, I'm actually going to ask Scott Archer with NCPRD and Heather Cook, who's managing the project, to come up and kick off the rest of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
You want to be Kelly?
Oh, yeah, and you'll have to distribute your own name.
Okay. There we go. I'm impressed that we get our own name tags. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here today. Again, Scott Archer, Director of the North Clackamas Park and Recreation District, and Heather Cook, our project manager for Milwaukie Bay Park, who I think most of you know at this point, maybe not quite everybody. But Heather's going to be doing the majority of the talking here. I'm just here to support and answer questions or entertain any discussion that we might have. And I just want to echo a little bit what Kelly said quickly about the citizen involvement, the PARB and our steering advisory committee, and then just the community at large in general. We've had outstanding participation on the process and the project thus far, and I think that's a testament to the city of Milwaukie and how interested people are in what happens here, and then especially this project in particular, because it's so important and so visible. So, and Heather's going to talk a little bit more about some of that. So with that, I'm going to just defer to Heather, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon, Mayor Gamba and councilors. I'm happy to be here once again. I also was remiss last time in not calling out our SAC members who were at the meeting, so I too wanted to catch up on that and just echo the words that Kelly said. And in addition to all that they do, they have also been tremendous volunteers for all the events that we have done above and beyond all the SAC meetings. So I'm also really grateful for the PARB. They serve together with 4 members that really represent a district-wide perspective as well. So it's a really great committee to be shepherding this process through as we look to serve the needs of both the city and the district. And I wouldn't mind reaching out, if you would oblige me, to just reach out maybe to Lisa Lashbrook and see if she would share a brief remark on just sort of her SAC experience. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
Yeah? Or Ben. Or Ben. Fight over it.
Potato.
Just the process has been.
You got to come up to the
Microphones.
I can share a seat with you. Oh, there we go. Okay. Lisa Lashbrook, SAC and PARB member, and I guess I just want to say it's been a really great process to be a part of. It's been great working with Heather and Catherine and Tuing Studio back there. I've learned a lot, and it's just. I feel like they really listen to us, and that's a really great thing to be able to say. I don't know what you want to add to that.
Sure. Ben Johnson, PARB. I'm a landscape architect, and sitting on the advisory council is a little different than what I do every day. Usually I'm in the other chair doing the work, so it's been really interesting being in that role, and I want to say the process has been very true and transparent and great, and seeing the designs carry through. And I'm really excited to see what happens next, because there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think that's what Heather's going to be talking about tonight.
Thank you, guys.
And I didn't mention Kelly. She's great to work with, too.
Thank you both, and thank the rest of PARB for us.
Will you both be able to stay for the whole presentation? I'm curious. Okay.
So tonight, is this?
I need your presentation.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was already up. There's that magic button. Essentially tonight, I'm going to really bring you up to speed, but I'm also going to reach back a little bit just to show that path that we've been on really for most of the last decade with the park, and just highlight a few things along the way. Even though we're here in 2019, there's a lot of work that we're building on. Last time we were here, we talked about the progress in the fall. We talked about the process of moving our 3 alternatives to a final alternative, but we weren't there yet. We were really just starting that process, and we had the very first concept estimates from those alternatives that were starting to give us sort of a reality check on what the project might cost to build, and we talked about schedule. Tonight we're going to talk about the process to date, to get a little bit of sense of where we've been and now where we are, just quickly. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the preferred alternative that's been developed from coming out of those 3 alternatives. We'll talk a little bit about the cost estimate and the funding, 2 sides of the same coin, more or less. And I'll talk about the phase that we're in now. It's the review phase where we're looking at different scenarios. I'll wrap up with some challenges that we're kind of summarize the challenges we're looking at, as well as the timeline, and then leaving some time for discussion. So some of you may be familiar with the 2010 master plan. It really is the underpinning of the work that's gone on this decade. We had the Klein Point that was built in 2012, and 2015 was the opening of all the work that was done on the periphery. What was left was the heart of the site, and that was work to be done in the future, which is why the city and the district teamed up to complete the park in 2018. So what happened after the plan went through approvals in 2010 is there were several things that were requested to be changed as conditions of approval, and then in addition there were several things that the city and community discussed that they would like to see changed. So we knew going into this plan that there were some desires for some key program changes and to bring key program elements forward. So for example, looking at the amount of impervious surface, looking at the geese deterrence, which is a challenge always at the park, looking for a way to maintain the redwood tree, to move the restroom and playground closer together, and to better define the trolley trail. So the plan has been an amazing underpinning for all the work that's followed, and our plan very much takes from that plan. So what we've been doing in the most recent future is, again, those 3 alternatives that were developed in the fall and brought to the public for our big public event, that was reviewed, that feedback and those plans were reviewed by the SAC, and the SAC also really helped us comb through the public input, and from there built a consensus around themes for moving forward with the final design. So that really helped shape our draft preferred alternative that you'll see tonight. And then since then we've been fine-tuning the design, continuing to review it, and also finally looking at costing. We just got our costs in last week from this latest phase, and then we'll continue to be in this phase for the next couple months where we will be continuing to review, continuing to look at our funding strategy and how to align the best possible project with the funding package. Just a quick highlight on public engagement. I've hit a couple of these high notes before, but when we look back at the 2 main public events and some of the smaller meetings in between, we've reached about 300 people at those 2 public events. From our small group discussions at the public workshops and out in the community, we've reached about 80 people. This is like roll your sleeves up type of small group participation. Our 2 surveys yielded about 1,100 respondents, which we were really pleased with. And then we've had a chance to make some progress in reaching Spanish-speaking residents more directly, and people either living with disability or representing communities with disabilities. So where are we now? We are December, January, we really, as I said, fine-tuned the draft alternative, and very importantly, got a revised cost estimate. And from that cost estimate, we can actually start to tease out some options. So it's a more advanced cost estimate than the last phase. It gives us a little bit more to work with. And that's why in January, February, we're in this process of review, meeting with you. We met with our Board of County Commissioners last week. We'll be meeting with the Steering Advisory Committee and talking with some technical advisory group members, as well as continuing as staff members to review. A big part of that is not just fine-tuning the design, although I'm sure there will be some of that. A big part of that is really completing the funding strategy that makes that park possible. And until we had a design, it's kind of hard to aim for that funding directly. So now all those things are starting to really come together, and then ultimately aligning that funding with the final alternative or alternatives that we'll look at. The final design, it's our goal this spring to come back to the community and have a design that's been recommended through the SAC so we can not only pursue funding, but share it with the community and bring it through planning approvals. Oh, wrong way. So the draft preferred alternative may look slightly familiar when you look at it because it really takes cues from several of the alternatives that were presented in November. It takes cues from the river, it takes cues from the access from downtown and the surrounding area, and specifically from several of those plans. There is a lot of detail here, and we won't have time to go into all of that tonight, but I would be happy to send this to you as well. Our SAC has not had a chance to review this yet, but that will be their work in our upcoming February meeting. Like I said, this was the synthesis of 3 alternatives, and including a lot of public input and a lot of process from the SAC to build consensus around the direction forward. I'm going to point out a few of the key elements. The amphitheater space with a stage and seat walls, terraces. We have a children's nature play area that takes advantage of the natural slopes on the site. A water feature that would be designed in a natural aesthetic. A plaza, which is a space that encompasses not only some flexible space for different kinds of events and uses, but also a picnic overlook area and the all-important restroom. And then the trolley trail going through the site. And so although the trolley trail goes through the site now, this would be the permanent alignment with ultimately, different signage and indications that that's a throughway. So a lot of great features, and it might look a little bit familiar because those are the features that have really been carried forward for almost a decade now. So when we look back at the 2010 plan, we had also a water feature and an amphitheater and a children's play area. We had a trolley trail and a plaza. And so we've taken those elements and really tried to stay true to those intentions and those approvals from back in 2010.
Can I ask just to clarify, the trolley trail does not, it's additional to a sidewalk? Is there a sidewalk along the frontage, or does it replace the sidewalk?
It would replace the sidewalk, okay. But it would be a combined bike ped walkway, which in order to replace the sidewalk has to have certain dimensions to make sure it's providing that same service.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. The really in the next phase of design, there's a lot of fine-tuning that will go on to make sure that that path is really something that's not only aligned in a way to avoid conflict with the park, but also has the design details which will ensure that bikers, pedestrians, and people will be able to really understand that at a very fundamental level without a lot of, just very natural cues. So that's a good question. So I think, we feel like we're sort of standing on the shoulders of all the really great work that's been done in the past. So the cost estimates for this phase definitely increased from the estimates that we had going into the project. We're looking at $8.2 million from our cost estimator and construction costs. That does include all the margins and adjustments. It's not the base cost. It also includes contingencies and escalation. It doesn't include the soft costs, which as a rule we set aside 20%, but that number would be fine-tuned as we go forward. Again, the city estimates going into the project were $3 to $3.8 million, again for construction costs. We've looked back at the cost estimates and to the best of our ability looking at them. It's not apples to apples, but trying to see what some of the differences might be. We know that the economy has been a big factor. It doesn't account for all the difference, but we know that the Portland construction inflation index, has from 2014 on has varied between about 4.5 and 6.5. So it's really changed the construction costs, and you guys are probably more aware of that than most people out there watching projects come through the city. There's also some differences in estimating and certainly in assumptions. the nice thing right now about working with this cost estimator is it's their specialty. So we feel like by digging into these cost estimates now at a pretty rigorous level, we'll have less surprises later. And that's always a good thing when you're looking at costs. So we think that accounts for the difference. We're seeing a climate of, construction costs similar to what you're seeing out there. So while the number is, higher than we'd like to see, it's not altogether surprising. But it does make us look very immediately at funding and what more we can be doing to be bringing together funds for a successful project. So for a long time, we've been listing out some of these things, some less so, but we've always been talking about SDC Zone 1 funds and city funds coming together for this project. We know that with the opportunity of the regional metro bond on the horizon, there's a possibility for some funding through our regional government, and that can both come through local shares and through grant programs like the Capital Improvement Projects program. We also have a variety of competitive grants that this project would be, excuse me, that this project would be very competitive for, not only because of its site and its linkage to downtown, but because of its long history of community involvement, because of the robustness of the process, and quite frankly, just, it's a very diverse community, and it can serve that community. We're also looking at the possibility of an NCPRD general obligation bond and what that could mean for the project, and then potential other or private funds that could be raised through, a foundation. So estimated total funds right now from the most probable sources are about 4.1 million. If you take that out from the full program option, including, soft costs, the gap is about 5.7 million. So that really is a main driver in how we're conducting this review phase. We're looking at really breaking this down into a range of scenarios. So we have a plan that has all the elements that we've carried forward. What could we look at in that plan that we could potentially parse out or alter to move forward with a design? And so we're looking at a range of everything from the full program of uses that would be 9.8 million to minimal uses, which would be, I'll talk about in just a second, would be going back to a more basic design that would still alter the park, but not include as many program elements. And then in between, we have some options as well. So our process is to really take several scenarios through this process of analysis, looking at the costs, looking at the funding, how that funding affects the timeline as well, and go through that process so we can determine with not only city and district together, but also our SAC, what we can recommend for a final design and how we can confirm a funding strategy that will support it. I think so far, the top scenarios that have sort of bubbled to the top are really, one, the full program. And again, this would be all the program elements with all the finishes. And by finishes, I mean, using stone in certain key places instead of concrete, or using more durable stainless steel railings instead of galvanized, or using even stone pavers instead of, concrete. So there's a number of variations on that, but if we put the design in as designed, that full program is most likely going to require a bond, and that has timing implications that we need to look at. So that scenario is the full program. We also have a minimal program that I mentioned on the other end. Something, and you can mix and match some things, but what a minimal program could look like is still maintaining the amphitheater and the stage and the terraces, and also maintaining the basic, I would call it the skeleton of the framework of the site, the pathways, the vegetation, but scaling back on the finishes and scaling back on the program elements so it becomes a much more simplified park design. And then in between, there's, some ways to mix and match, but one of the most probable third scenarios is to build that minimal program and then build in other elements at a later date. And there's really two ways to do that. One is to build the base and bring all the details in later for, say, like a water feature or a play area. But there's also a scenario where you spend a little more money up front and install, say, the plumbing for the water feature and do the rest later. So there's some different ways to sort of slice it, but essentially we're looking at sort of 3 basic scenario types.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't see the restroom where you're planning to put that into that.
Yeah, the restroom is what I would say is the framework or base program. So we didn't parse out the restroom, but we know the cost of a lot of those features that could be parsed out. But they're all in what the 6.1 would be a minimal program.
And so when you talk about a minimal program like this at 6.1 with some of the infrastructure, built in, I guess my curiosity question is, why choose amphitheater over playground? I mean, it would seem to me that a park, a natural thing might be to put the playground in first before we put in something like an amphitheater. I mean, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no, you could. And actually, the cost estimate is very useful for this exact discussion because you can take out the amphitheater and put in the play area and the water feature. So there's kind of that ability to swap things in or out.
Is the cost factor basically the same then, or?
I'd have to look back at the numbers. Okay. Yeah. There's, I would say, yeah, I just don't have the number off the top of my head. You could take all of, there's, I think, 5 key program elements we separated out, including the amphitheater, the play area, the fountain, the water feature, and the picnic overlook. Which is a real asset on the site. So that is another feature that you could take out, but not take out others. I'm missing one more. It's not on my mind. But anyway, those 5 elements to sort of figure out mix and match what would our sum total be, and then you can essentially, yeah, the restroom's part of the base program. But anyway, you can really take out some of those special structures like a trellis over the picnic overlook or the restroom and reduce that way. You can reduce through finishes and you can reduce through these major program elements. And what we try to do is chunk out major program elements that you might be able to put in later so that we can sort of look at what it means to take those out and whether there's a possibility to put them in.
Heather, on the size of the restroom, how many toilets, how large of a space are we talking?
Sure. Right now, the restroom building includes 2 restrooms, one ADA and another, and it includes a mechanical room in order to get power on the site, and like a room for like a hose bib. It's a basic maintenance. It's maybe smaller than a room, but it's a space. So it's kind of like 4 compartments within a small building, and it's tucked at the edge of the plaza, sort of underneath the tree, but not too close.
But how many, stalls?
2.
2 total stalls?
2 total. Mm-hmm. Like what we have right now?
Well, we have 1 down at the boat launch and 2 at the main site, with the thinking being that we talked a lot about this in programming, that if we build 2 and have the 3rd, we have restrooms to meet, probably 95 to 99% of the conditions. And then for special events, we've looked at access and pathway so that we can bring in portable toilets for those events. And then we basically have a smaller footprint for the restrooms in the long term, but we also have less restrooms sort of on an everyday basis.
Okay.
We can come back.
We'll do comments at the end, yeah.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
And then, so challenges, just to summarize, I think we hit most of these, but funding availability is obviously something we want to balance with quality design, so trying to get the best project we can for the most feasible funding plan. And the quality design isn't, it's not to be flashy, it's to provide the elements that serve the community, whether it's people coming from just across downtown or people coming in on TriMet. And it's also to provide finishes that will really last, so we don't build the park and find that we immediately have a lot of maintenance issues and a rundown park. Another challenge is just the feasibility and timing of a bond. A bond could be an excellent mechanism for funding this kind of regional asset. It's how a lot of districts fund projects like this, but it does change the timing of the project, and it does change the what's known and unknown. And finally, the timing of the project. Again, that changes with the funding scenarios. It also has been, we've talked about really shooting in this process for the Army Corps permit goal of October 2020. And so we looked into this at the very beginning of the project and found out that the Corps actually was expressing a lot of flexibility with that date because of how common it is to do extensions for projects that are ongoing. But I also have Adam Zucker here tonight with us from Zucker Engineering, and I thought it'd be helpful for him just to be a great engineer and come tell you a little bit more about the permit just in a minute or two. So, do you mind coming up, Adam?
Sure. Why don't you stay there?
Well, thank you, Mayor and councilors. Yeah, so I'm a water resource engineer and environmental permitting specialist. Heather had a lot of foresight with this project as far as bringing on one of my former colleagues from ESA to actually go through the whole, I guess, permitting scenario of where we're at, just because it gets quite complicated, as you guys probably know about all the lexicon of permits that are out there. But I would say, from what we've talked to with the Corps, as well as my experience, a lot of the heavy, or most of the heavy, or almost all of the heavy lifting's been done with the completion of the stairs down to the water this fall. So basically, the trigger for the Corps permit was the impact to the natural resources below the ordinary high water, and with the phasing of the construction of the perimeter trail as well as the completion of the steps, all of those elements have been addressed. So the time frame of the permit is where they're really concerned. The elements of the in-water work are being addressed. All of our work is above that. There are a couple things that kind of cross over, like floodplain and stormwater quality, but if you're to kind of just go moving forward, just looking at this project, and if you had no history of permits to do the project that we're looking at right now, wouldn't require a Corps permit. We're just kind of pieced on because it was part of the grand scheme of things. And we've talked to the Corps of Engineers and DSL and all the folks just to tell them kind of what we're thinking and about the timing. And I think one scenario is just to give them an update on what our scenario is and kind of go that direction. Or I guess another scenario would be to basically kind of close out the Corps permit and give them a heads up as far as, this is what's going on. The complete construction of this park is a couple years out, so maybe it doesn't make sense to kind of keep doing extensions given that we've already completed all of the in-water work. And that is, a possibility of reaching out to the Corps and the permitting agencies just to see how they would like to handle it. But, it's my understanding that if you were to do this park with no history, it wouldn't require many of those permits, so there's not a lot of risk associated with kind of that 2020 timeframe.
So go ahead.
I was just going to clarify too. It's because it's upland work, and we're above ordinary.
So the existing sidewalk along the water is above or at or above ordinary high water mark.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, where it gets, where there becomes a more of an overlap is, say, we were to redo stormwater facilities and we needed an outfall below that, then suddenly you find yourself below that, or say we wanted to build more steps or make something there which isn't in the plan, then that really would be where the Corps would be actively interested.
I guess I thought we heard before that the prior plan was approved as to that the amount of impervious surface we create is something that they want to look at.
So, once you trigger kind of impact to the water resource, they can start to have broader jurisdiction over other things that wouldn't necessarily require their permitting. So stormwater. Once you're talking with the Corps of Engineers and the National Marine Fisheries, they're concerned about water quality, and so then they can have a say in the stormwater. So that's kind of where that comes into play. But I think where our plan is, and I've been doing a lot of comparing what was presented back in 2010 as far as what was submitted for the permitting, and this current scheme, I think, has less impervious area, and it also has more cut from the floodplain. So I think one of the things we can do is, if we decide to kind of close out the permit, or quote unquote close out, we can just tell them that what we're planning to do in the future actually does still meet or is better than the conditions that were presented from the original permit.
Do you feel there would be, sorry.
I was just going to say, Councilor Bader, you're not crazy. We did say that. It was actually Chuck Eaton who said it when we were working on this originally. But I think what staff is saying is that we feel comfortable with the conversations that NCPRD has had with the Corps since that time, just to get further clarification. And there's more comfort than there was when Chuck was originally having those conversations around both the waterfront and the park. So I really appreciate that the team did the additional research and additional outreach in order to get there. I think they shed more light, and the Corps has been more open to the possibility than they were in the past.
And there's still more conversations to go, of course, but this is sort of our best look at it.
So it sounds a little bit like there is an argument for closing out the permit. What is the process if we did that? It sounds like we sort of have a good faith understanding with the Corps that if we close out this permit, any future work that involves moving soil around, which we know we'd need to do, et cetera, wouldn't trigger a permit process? Or
it wouldn't, yeah, there wouldn't be anything that would trigger the Corps' concern.
So they would just leave us alone?
Sure.
I don't think anyone would make that claim, but it's a good one to try.
But there will be other permits. You know, there's still floodplain requirements, and you know, our local planning. There's still plenty of permits and approvals, but that one looks like there might be a couple of paths, and we really have to figure out which path and whether that one would make sense.
Yeah. And is it DCLD that looks at cut and fill? There's some state agency that has to review.
It's actually the city.
Oh, is it just the city? Okay, I thought there was a state. Over a certain threshold, I thought there was a state.
DEQ.
For cut and fill.
DEQ.
Yeah. Was that Chuck? Is that now Tammy? I'm just trying to remember. For cut and fill.
You've got an engineer in the audience.
That's it. It's Tammy.
City would review it. So, yeah, it'd come through the city.
And for those who can't hear the staff person away from the microphone, yes, it would come through the city engineering department.
We should just mic all the staff.
Oh, well, you might not want to hear what's said.
That's exactly why I want to mic all the staff.
We wouldn't
Never
hear
mind
it, but
that.
everybody watching it.
Yeah, that would.
So anyway. So the
And just maybe
sorry.
So the permit, the closure process, I guess it's not, it's really, that's initiated from the completion of the work that's been done. So that would be something that I guess the city would initiate, kind of part of the permit requirements is there's like a closeout report. So that would basically initiate, we're kind of, telling the story of we're done with everything, and, at that point would also be a time to just say, maybe get additional assurances that things are all clear once they start accepting that. And then there's kind of a monitoring period that goes along with the current permit. So
If we did that, is there no take-backs? If we do that,
that's
and
the
then
million-dollar question.
But if we go forward with that process and then begin to hear some alarm and concern from the Corps, is there a way to reverse that process and still move forward with a project of some sort?
I don't know. I guess my thought is that there's really no reason that they would be involved after that, just because there's nothing within their jurisdiction. Those things that they kind of reached into as far as the water quality and the earthwork, that was because you had, initiated that consultation or required it. But once it's kind of done, they don't have that jurisdiction anymore, or it's outside of their jurisdiction to be, unless there's a reason to trigger that, so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, your explanation was very helpful.
Yeah.
My experience previously was that unless we were in water, there was really no jurisdiction for the Corps, and then we were told differently, and I was like, okay, maybe something changed. But your explanation is perfect, that they're going to reach as far as they can reach if they have an open permit, but once it's closed, it's outside of their jurisdiction. Totally makes sense.
The key is communication, so we'll definitely not make assumptions before we get very far. We'll make sure they're in the loop. Yeah, thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As far as the timeline, all things being equal otherwise, we are still doing this design and review phase through the end of March. Hoping, again, to have a plan, a recommendation that we can both bring to the public and begin to use for funding and for planning approvals. Also ongoing is a funding strategy. You can't have one without the other. And then assuming that we can come to consensus on a recommendation, we would move forward into construction documents and permits and approvals. That could be affected if we decide to take a longer timeline. If we take a shorter timeline, then we could continue into those phases. And then essentially, once the funding is in place, we would then begin the bidding and construction process, or once the funding is close. We're looking at a somewhat variable timeline depending on the funding, and so we'll know a lot more when we can complete the funding strategy. And as next steps, again, continuing the reviews that are underway now, we'll be continuing development of the funding strategy. Our February SAC meeting is probably our biggest one to date, because we'll really be diving into, what scenarios we could potentially recommend and what implications that has for funding and timing. And then ideally a spring public meeting to share this with the public, and then to design, development, and construction documents. And then hopefully some time for discussion, or are we at our max here?
We're going to take a couple minutes, whether we are or not. I've got a couple items.
Sure.
The Monroe Greenway intersects the trolley trail at the park.
Mm-hmm.
As currently designed, at least, looking at this very small schematic, it's not a great design for a greenway entry onto the trolley trail. It's more or less currently how it is, and I've used it on a pretty regular basis, and it's not good. So opening that up more to where maybe there were bollards and a wider paved area at the end of Monroe for cyclists coming down Monroe to be able to get onto the trail and turn. Right now, because it's, whatever that is, a 3-foot wide little piece of sidewalk between Rosemary, and if there's anybody trying to walk anywhere, it makes it really hard to ride a bike into it. So
that's a good point.
I would consider that some kind of adjustment there. And then the other piece is the bathroom. I've been at the park on a number of days when all it was a moderate boating crowd, and seen lines at the bathroom, heard constant complaints. I've had people reach out to me and say, really? That was the bathroom you guys put in this whole park? And I said, no. There's going to be a bigger bathroom when we build the rest of the park. And if we turn around and we put 2 toilets in, they're going to come unhinged. If we even have moderate little concerts that the city throws, right, that the guys that put on the First Friday or put on the park, the little concerts we have here down by the library, if we have that level of crowd, we're going to need more than 2 stalls. So I would strongly recommend expanding that by probably 3 times.
At the cost of, I just want to be really careful that we recognize that comes at a cost, and as important, I think, is making sure that power gets to the park. I mean, the power went out multiple times. Well, it's housed in the same building.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we're at what would come what would the expense be for adding 3 times as many bathrooms?
Yeah, what's the difference?
I just
What's
want
the
to know.
trade-off?
I was going to say some of the bigger Portland parks that get used for Sunday parkways have like two stalls, 2 single-person, unisex stalls. I don't know that it sounds so unreasonable to me. I mean, yes, I also envisioned a men's and a women's and a, bigger thing, but I also know that also becomes more of a maintenance and a security and everything else if you get into a bigger collective bathroom rather than separate little cubicles, unisex cubicle stalls. Yeah. So what is the trade-off and what is the,
Well, I appreciate the conversation on the dais right now because I was concerned, like, in my mind, I guess I was thinking larger restrooms, so I appreciate hearing the various comments because that helps me sort things out.
Well, I mean, Llewellyn does concerts with 1 porta potty or 2? 1, yeah. And they have a pretty good crowd.
Our club does too. I think we usually have about 200 people or so.
Yeah.
And just 1 porta potty?
No.
1 or 2.
It's definitely something we could look at. There are some sort of formulas for, how many portable toilets you need for a crowd, and there might be a way to look at, just analyze, what is the cost benefit of putting in more versus portable toilets. You will definitely need portable toilets for many of the events. So, I think that's a good point, something to look at.
Just as a comparative, we had 8 portable toilets plus the regular toilet down there for Solstice this year. So, and I was talking to Jason yesterday that he thought we were probably underserviced by 2.
Mm-hmm. We were
Underserviced by 2?
Well, and I'm less thinking about events because we do have that option. I'm thinking more about we have the boating crowd that is already feeling like they're underserved. We have the potential for increased regular traffic from non-motorized watercraft that are using those stairs. We throw a playground into the mix and we have a nice 70-degree day, and I don't know.
I'd be down there having picnics.
Yeah, picnics on the picnic
really,
overlook.
If Art Mob stepped up and we had weekly summer concerts down there, do we really want to be hauling in a porta potty every week?
Every time.
It seems tacky at the very least.
Yeah. And again, if you look at what we do with the farmers market, what you would probably end up with is permanent porta potties down there for the summer months of consistent events, which is what we do during. How many do we have for the
farmers market? Has 1 for people with disabilities and 2 regular.
So it's just something to keep in mind is that is a solution, but it is not necessarily one that people have usually.
And that is what happens at Spring Park as well. There's a seasonal parked there.
Mm-hmm. I think we definitely want to look at cost factors and comparisons.
Yeah, because the cost of 2 doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a unit cost per se. We'd have to look at it, so we can look at it. We can certainly look at it.
Great, thanks.
If we are talking about restrooms in greater detail, could we also talk about having some sort of more sightly enclosure for temporary restrooms, if that turns out to be, like we just need to have 2 extra porta potties that are parked there for the summer months. Having something that makes them look a little more presentable around them would be nice. That's something we've talked about as a possible small project down in Spring Park, because we know it's coming.
And it's something that we've done at the food carts. So we've created that sort of shading area with the pots and.
Yeah, and extra hand washing, obviously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I think I'll look forward to seeing the sort of block choices of how mixing and matching broken out to where we can see what that phasing could look like, or have a conversation around that possible phasing.
Can you go back to your money slide?
Yeah. Yeah.
This one?
Oh, no, I meant the one of where the potential, so that one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, can we real quick look at the one that's like a couple before that? It says, I thought it said something about 3 million from the city.
Oh, that's the one.
Not that,
250
before
from
that.
the city.
Oh, yeah, no, back, yeah, I'm sorry. It was that second one. 3 million.
Just one back.
No, go back.
Is it not that one?
One back.
Oh, sorry.
3 million estimated from the city's CIP and 3.8 included for the project budget in RFP. So, but it didn't look like what you had on the schematic matched these numbers.
The schematic, you mean the last time?
Yeah, the one with all
Following
the
slide.
detail on it.
Oh.
I think I know what
Oh,
the
okay.
question is.
Okay.
So, yeah,
For CIP, or for, not for CIP,
Well-
for SDCs.
so this, just to be really clear, I think what you're asking, Councilor Parks, it's hard for me not to say Wilda, so being a little bit more formal, but is that
Okay,
these are,
Mr. Archer.
even though it says, thank you, even though it says that it's estimated in the CIP, that's really just an estimate. That wasn't actual money that was
Oh,
Allocated.
okay. Thank you.
just to be really clear. So then
Yeah.
the next slide was, here are some actual funding
Yeah, and that-
sources,
okay.
as well as a list of some other potential funding
All right, thank you,
sources.
because to me,
I think that was
in my brain, I was trying to think of how.
You were
those
thinking
match
that
made
3 to
them.
3.8 was actual money
Yeah.
somewhere. Those were just the estimates. And
I got
did
you.
I?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Tell
But
me
if
I
there
missed
is an
something.
actual 3.8 million, let us know.
Where is it? Yes.
Well,
There's no line.
oh, well, there's there's that question, right, which is, aren't SDCs, this is, we're channeling Councilor Abma, former Councilor Abma here. The rules changed within NCPRD that don't limit you to Zone 1, right? So SDC funds could be used, recognizing that this is a regional asset?
The rules have not changed yet. Council
District
Parks is
Advisory Board.
on the committee.
Sitting as a CSD.
We were in the process of updating the SDC methodology. We've stopped and just sort of held on our work on that right now, but the recommendation from the committee was to change it's our own ordinance. It's a self-imposed restriction, if you will, to spend within the zone. The committee recommended that we lift that restriction, but right now we're holding on that. But one of the challenges too with that is that when the money was collected up to that point, if the rule does change, we can't go backwards and
Apply
anything
it
that
to
was
the former.
anything that was collected under that rule applied to. So it would be going forward. So that rule may in fact change, but it doesn't impact anything collected under that rule, if that makes sense.
Okay.
However, that's certainly something that that's what you just talked about. The issue there is exactly why the committee was supportive of doing that. Is if something is of district-wide significance, why wouldn't we be able to use some portion or more of a district-wide funding source? So.
Right, well, and if it's district-wide importance and regionally significant, and if you go out for a bond, you're going to go out district-wide,
Correct.
right? Which we don't have the opportunity to do, so you'd go out district-wide. So it makes, to me, it, makes a clear line. It makes sense to use district funds, SDCs.
And just on that point, while we're on that for just a second, I do want to acknowledge this this project. We know how important it is to you, the council. We know how important it is to the residents of the city of Milwaukie, but as well, it's very important to the district. We have this as a priority. This is in our capital plan, and it has been for quite a while. It's risen up, thanks in part to your advocacy, but it's also just an important project for the district. So that's why we're looking at any available funding that might be a source of helping with this project. So there's always a balance of how much usage it will generate from around the district or around the region, even beyond the district and the city. But it's a significant project to our entire district, which is why we're putting so much effort into helping to do this. And So we're looking, and we're turning over all rocks. And
well, so going to that point about how to assess who it draws, it seems to me this summer when the boating and summer season is up, that's pretty easy. Somebody goes through and collects all the license plate numbers and looks at where those people live, right? I mean, how hard would that be to do some measurement of that, of how broad of an area it pulls from? It seems to me we could probably collect some good data there. And which leads me into my other question, which is, do you think there's any, I mean, I know the Board of County Commissioners is your board, but apart from district funds, do you think there's any opening or do we have any ability to convince the Board of County Commissioners that this merits some support from them, from their own funding, from their own budget as a regional amenity?
Yeah.
As a regional amenity.
Yeah.
And to your first point, was there any information like that? I mean, we had 1,100 people who participated in the surveys. Was there information about where those people resided during that?
There was zip code information.
So
yeah,
we have some of that already.
We have that.
Yeah.
We do have that.
Well, I'm going to carefully answer your question, Councilor Beatty, because I can't speak for the board, but what we do know is it's significant locally and district-wide, and it's going to be a regional asset. It's going to be from all around the county, from all around the metro region. So in as much as I can't really answer your question, what I can just tell you is that we're looking at any and all local and regional funding opportunities, and we've got some of those listed here with metro dollars that come from the region at large, and state grants that come from, the lottery dollars and other funding sources. So we certainly are. But what you just suggested, is something that potentially we could talk about at some point. I haven't heard that suggestion yet, so that was.
Well, I thought Councilor Abma went and made that to the board at one meeting, and I'm willing to go to one of their meetings too.
What I specifically remember, and I may not be remembering this correctly, and just off the cuff here, is. Councilor Abma was asking for the board to strongly consider the proceeds from the sale of Hoodview that we have sitting in a separate account that is going to be considered for any and all appropriate district projects, of which this certainly may qualify. And then beyond that, there may have been a broader ask there, but I'm not remembering the specifics of that certainly. So. But
when we talk about SDC funds, now they're not all dedicated to the specific zones. Is there also a general pot, or are they all dedicated to specific zones?
So 2014 is the key date on that question. Prior to 2014, the NCPRD SDCs were collected where there was a district-wide component to every SDC that could be spent anywhere for a qualifying project. Then there was a local component that had to be, so it's sort of like neighborhood parks and then bigger regional or community parks where you would spend the district-wide money. 2014 was the date that changed, and the district board passed a local ordinance that mandated that the money stay in the zones, even the district-wide component. And that's what the discussion a little bit ago about, are we gonna loosen that rule back up again? So unfortunately, even though there is a district-wide component to every SDC, there's another layer of that rule that says, but yet that can only be spent inside that zone. It's kind of
so the
quirky.
recommendation that the District Advisory Board made goes to the BCC, but because of other issues that NCPRD is involved in right now and trying to sort things out, I take it that's why it hasn't gone to the Board of County Commissioners, even though, that happened like a year ago now, so.
That is correct, yep.
Could have been building up good things.
So our challenge has been the certainty or uncertainty around our district boundaries on the east side, as you're all, I know, familiar with, and we're closer to resolution now than we were at that point in time. So we're hopefully not that far from getting back and into that process. We were probably 75% of the way through, and all the way from a recommendation from the the DAB and what was effectively the SDC update committee. So we're not going to, that work isn't just going to fall to the wayside. We're just sort of waiting to pick it back up again and move forward.
And I also wanted to appreciate and just give a little bit of thank you to Scott for the amount of time and effort he put into that. And we also were trying to figure out how all of our parks were going to be playing into that as well. And he spent a lot of extra time on that and in that delay process, I think, in part for our conversations. So thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask on the Metro local share, both, for the city and for the district, what's the time? I mean, obviously November's the timeline for whether it passes or not, but what's the timeline for knowing what the allocations would be if it passes?
Probably, I just attended a meeting this past week where that was a prime part of the discussion with the Metro Parks Director and some other folks. So the Metro Council is considering, of course, whether to put that on the ballot and what it would look like. Here's what I understand today is they're considering a rate that would be essentially the same as the 06 bond that passed, which I think is about 19 cents per thousand. The local share component that has been recommended to date is essentially the same calculation. There's a population calculation and how it gets distributed. So NCPRD gets some of that based on that, and the city actually gets that because you are considered a local provider as well. And that's what we're kind of putting that up as those potential funds because we need to see. What I can tell you is the Metro, according to staff, I believe that the Metro Council would like to have it referred to the ballot by not later than June. So backing up from that, we're not that far out, and the next couple of months, I think they have some continued work sessions to do. But the other thing I want to mention, and this is just information at this point, is that there is a collective effort of local park provider agencies, so park and rec departments and districts and various types of local providers in the metro region are a number of us, and I say us because NCPRD is on board with this, and we sent a letter to Metro last week, and our board supported this letter. We are asking that the Metro Council consider a larger percentage of the total pot of money go to the local share component. And the reason that we're suggesting that is we think that is one of the most effective ways to spend that money is if you increase that share, we're very effective at taking money and just putting it in a very, I think, efficient, timely manner, and for projects that each community already knows that they want. So we are asking that Metro consider a bigger share go to the local providers through the local share program. So what we're hoping is that some of those numbers, there's a lot of TBDs, and our numbers are pretty conservative right now, even what we're saying for our estimate to put to the project. NCPRD from the 06 bond got about $2.4 million in the local share. We'd love to see that number go up, and I don't recall what the city's is, but I think it was a million and change or 1 point something, and would hope that would go up, and then we could have conversations around how much of those local share dollars we could put into this project. I think that might end up being one of the better sources of funding that we have to us. So.
We're going to have to move on. We do have one more item before our executive session, unless there's just an absolute gotta hear it today kind of question. Okay, so cool.
Appreciate the conversation. We'd love to come back and continue having any updates with you as you feel like it's necessary, and as Ann, we'll keep communicating. But I just want to close by sort of reiterating what's already been said. But this is a very important project to the district, and I want to express my appreciation for working with you, the council, and Ann and Kelly and the staff. Obviously, the price tag is higher than we'd hoped, but we are not terribly surprised because of the way the construction costs are and what we're sort of the market that we're in. But I just want to emphasize to you, the council, that we're working on coming up with how we can get this done. And ultimately, we want to do the right project, and that might mean spending a little bit more, figuring out some ways to get there. But we want to do right by the community with this project. It's a special one, and I think we're only going to get one chance to do it the right way. So we're trying to figure out a way to balance all of that. So we'll keep working.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, next up we have Kronberg Park an update, and this is Kelly Brooks and Jennifer Garbely.
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
Jennifer's talking.
Hey, Tammy.
I'm looking at a revised one.
Hi. It's nice to see you all again.
There, it's been a long time.
It has been. I think it's been about 45 minutes or so, but I'm happy to be here again. Before we do our Kronberg update, which I'm going to have Jennifer come up and help me with, I would like to introduce you to our new city engineer. Where'd you go? Tammy, you can come on up here if you want. Tammy, she just started today. She got to start on a snow day and only had a small amount of perilous driving conditions to deal with on her way in. But most recently, she has served as the transmission pipeline project manager for the Willamette Water Supply Project. That's as a part of her work at Crollo Engineers. Before she joined the private sector, she actually worked for the Portland Bureau of Environmental Services for about 20 years. That about right? For a lot of that time, she was a supervising engineer was her title. And one of the most notable projects, or at least one of the ones that I'm super impressed by during that time, was managing the East Side Combined Sewer Overflow Project. So I don't know if any of you ever had a chance to actually go see that. That was a big old pipe.
Design manager.
Design manager? Okay, design manager. Tammy has a lot of amazing experience with project management, she makes the projects I've worked on seem kind of small sometimes, keeping big projects on task, and has a ton of excellent engineering experience that I'm really excited to have on this team. So I wanted you to get a chance to meet her, and Tammy, you can say anything you'd like, but you'll see more of her.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome aboard.
Look forward to working with you.
We're happy to have you.
And that's it. So she gets to hang around and watch Kronberg, but she's not responsible for anything we say because she just got here today. So with that, I'm going to swap out Tammy for Jennifer, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were here 3 months ago? I think it was Chuck's last night. And one of the things that I said with Kronberg is we would give you more regular updates. So this won't be the last, but we wanted to make sure that we were here at tonight's milestone because we're just prior to moving ahead with 2 separate contracts. One of them is related to trees and tree removal, and I find that it's important for everybody to know what's happening to the trees before things happen to the trees. So that's the main thing that we're going to have some diagrams at the end, but overall we want to make sure we're just giving you an update on where we are with scope and schedule and any of the permits that we have in the pipeline at this point. So Jennifer has pulled together a wonderful presentation that's loading while I'm talking, and she's going to walk you through it, and then I'll just be here to help answer any questions along the way.
Hey. So first of all, I'm so excited. We are going to do it. It's at the end of the tunnel. We are going to build this.
It's a bridge, not a tunnel.
It's actually an elevated multi-use path.
So I just wanted to remind you what the project is. We are building a 12-foot path that's elevated from our south connection at River Road at 99E. Along the way, curving around some trees, lots of trees, and then to a at-grade path that will be permeable, that will connect to our existing pedestrian Kellogg Creek Bridge that runs right underneath the light rail. That's been closed for a while, so we are close. It will be lit, so there'll be lights all the way around the whole path. And yeah, so let's jump in. So we are splitting this into 2 contracts, and the reason for that is to meet the Migratory Bird Act. We need to have tree removal completed by March 1st. So right now, we've got quotes out to get contractors on board. I hope to have a contractor selected by February 7th. And
That's tomorrow. Or no, day after tomorrow.
Day after.
Okay, okay.
Or by Friday. We're
Yeah.
close. So I still have, we got to meet land use in order before we can pull the trees out. So we're getting there. You'll hear about it. And then the second main contract, I hope to go out to bid March. So we're prepping those documents right now and getting it ready. We are still in ODOT review, but we are this close. We are so close. So what we're dealing with right now is right here at the river connection on 99E, that crosswalk. And we're required to maintain 24 access during construction for that crosswalk. So we're in a traffic control plan review right now with ODOT. I expect to have comments back this week, and then prepare a final document that will then ask for our permit and everything with all approvals to move forward. With that, we're in land use. We submitted our type 2 application. The public comment period ends February 7th. It's a big day for us. We're moving nicely. We received 1 comment for North Clackamas Parks and Rec Department about a mitigation plan, and so we're working with them to make sure we can meet their needs and do a nice partnership with that mitigation. As of today, there's been no additional public comments received, but they have till the 7th if anything comes in. We are required to have land use approval before we can move those trees. So it is our critical path right now, is making sure we get our land use completed.
Has this gone past the tree board? Have they had any?
Nothing's come up, so we submitted the tree removal permit, and it's gone out to its review period. It's closed, and we received 1 comment for a tree that's right in the middle of the path. That's only a smaller tree. So at this point, we've dictated that we're not going to change the alignment for it. But we'll mitigate it.
We followed the process that you're supposed to follow for the trees in terms of the notification and giving time for tree board and any other interested parties to participate, and Peter's been involved in that. So we've tried to be very open about the trees. I don't know that you ever actually gave a presentation on it directly to the tree board, but they have a pathway to participate in that permit review process, and we use that. So.
And they were made aware of which trees are coming down and where they would be cut.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and we also, just to be uber transparent too, we marked, when we were going for the permit process, we marked both trees on city and state right away. Even at the time, it wasn't necessarily clear that we needed to mark on the state. We marked, right?
No.
Okay.
ODOT didn't want us to mark the trees on their property, actually. They don't have that process. It's not required of them. So no, they were requested not to mark ODOT trees on right away.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong about that.
So
I thought I saw flagging up.
I did too.
Yeah.
But yes.
But we're going to show you the diagram at the end that shows all the trees.
Yeah.
So, and that was in the packet for review tonight, is all the trees. So my apologies.
Yeah. So we submitted the ODOT tree removal permit. All they need to finish processing that is the traffic control plan from the contractor on how they're going to remove the trees to make sure they don't impact the highway when they're doing it. And then we'll be ready to move. So they're on board with us splitting the contract into 2 so they could finish the design element of the traffic control plan for the main project. So as soon as I get engineering buy-off, I will be submitting for ODOT permits. Hopefully this month. It will be this month. So, tree removal. We originally had 16 trees that we were going to be removing for this entire project in order to build this new pathway. However, we've identified 2 that we are actually going to save, and they're 2 of the little bit larger Doug firs. They're close to the walkway, but they are, we feel we can build it and not damage them with the new structure. So yeah, we've got 14 trees that will come out. We've gone through both process to, as far as for ODOT and for public review and the tree board. Schedule. So we're responding to land use comments to hopefully move that process as quickly as possible. We're finalizing ODOT comments to get a complete final design, and then bid in March, award in April, and we anticipate completion December 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It is.
Yes.
It is.
We're serious.
We're serious. It's going to happen.
Kelly's like,
We're going to be back in April with an award. That's the plan. And I feel optimistic. I've reached out to ODOT, and they are have a few small comments, but nothing major at this point. And so we're looking good.
great.
Questions?
Just a curiosity, just because I'm not used to seeing it like this. You talk about each tree, it's 6-inch Doug fir, and then 4-foot DL. What does that mean?
You're talking about this plan.
DBA? It's not.
It's not.
DBH?
That's what I thought it
Yeah.
was at first too, and then it didn't make
DL.
sense, so.
No, I don't know what the DL stands for.
Okay.
No, but the description would be like the 8-inch
6-inch.
maples, the size of your diameter.
At
I'm thinking there's some height in there that might be
Yeah.
identified, how big, because
I thought so too, but then I looked
that's a
at the
30-inch though.
redwood and I went, nope, that doesn't work.
yeah, I don't know what the DL stands for.
Okay, cool.
We can find out.
It was just curiosity because I had not seen that before, and
So these maples, I mean, there are all kinds of maples. They didn't distinguish
Norway or
Norway
big
versus,
leaf or-
yeah.
big
yeah.
leaf.
I mean, if they're,
The surveyor giving this information at this point, so it's not, this isn't a tree arborist, this is a survey. This is a
Okay.
tree survey is what you're getting, so that's why I'm thinking the numbers are going to account for us in that aspect.
yeah, okay.
Would you like additional species information? I mean, Julian's been out, and he would be the one I would call and ask.
I mean, I just, if there are non-native maples in there, if especially there are those Norway maples, which are considered an invasive species,
Those need to go.
and we're hiring a tree cutting thing, we ought to just be cutting them, you know? So,
Okay.
Just so you know, we would, and Kelly can correct me, I think we would still have to notice those.
Yeah.
And so it may not align, but if we can make it align, I totally support it. My question is just making sure it doesn't, our issue has been making sure that we don't delay the cutting of trees during the migratory process. So
Right.
I'll let Kelly speak to it more, but that's my only
Yeah,
concern.
at this point, I want to get a contractor in to remove the ones that are in the path or in the way so we can continue our construction, because if we don't remove those, we will be delayed.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done to flesh out our ultimate mitigation plan. So there's the required mitigation, and then we're working closely. That's why we really appreciated NCPRD's comments and want to continue to work through that with them. So part of our mitigation work does need to remove non-native species. So I think we have some potential opportunities there in terms of what we're requesting and the work we're getting done with NCPRD in terms of additional removal of things that need to go. And then I also think we can consider, since we haven't finalized the other contract, we can't load it up with a bunch of stuff, but we can see, I don't know if there's any additional vegetation removal that needs to be in the big contract. For the small near-term one, we're pretty time constrained and working with a cap on how much we can spend. So I doubt we'll be adding a lot to that specific one, but it doesn't mean that there won't be other opportunities to remove invasives as we keep moving along. Does that?
Sure.
And get them properly marked and go through
Sure.
the process to make sure that works.
Yep.
Yeah, I think actually removing invasives, if they're on the invasive list, that's like an exception to having to have a tree permit, I think.
Really? Yeah, you might be
It's
right.
in the code, yeah, we can remove them per code.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm learning all about our mitigation. I'm learning all about that stuff. But yes, I think you're right. But we have more follow-up to do there and good opportunities. And I think Tanya and Jennifer are having good conversations. And also when you hear from PARB in a couple weeks on their work plan, we've identified Kronberg as just an ongoing opportunity based on the disturbance and opportunity to mitigate. So.
Great.
Great.
Good. Thank you very much.
Oh, are you going to give updates to the two neighborhoods on either end of the bridge?
We can.
Yeah, that would be good.
Absolutely.
That would
go talk to
I
them.
meet with Historic Milwaukie each month now.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of how much construction we have going on in South Downtown. So
I think Island Station would probably appreciate hearing
would like
from
to
you.
hear.
They have room on their agenda in February, just so.
February? And the date?
I do. We can talk later.
Okay.
That's great.
Yes, we will come. We're happy to give updates. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And we'll be back. I think we should be back to you in March, right? We can do another March. We're February now. But I think
April. April for award.
March, April, we come back and do another touch
Award.
point.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're okay with that.
We're good with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Thank you very much. Great work. All right. So, after we adjourn, council will go into executive session. Council will meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning legal rights and duties regarding current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Jennifer?